Several months ago, we were walking into the kitchen and noticed how dingy it was, and I talked with my director. Boy, it sure would be nice to get the kitchen remodeled. And she said, call HomeAid and see if they might come out and take a look. And we looked at the kitchen, and then we looked at the dining room, and then we looked at the lobby, and by the time we were finished, we were on the third floor.
I think that this was a very important project to HomeAid. As builder captain, when I brought this to our folks in the office, everybody jumped on it as always.
The beauty of this project is the impact on the inside. It is home for 14 men that are in a transitional space.
It's not often that we have men's shelters that we have the opportunity to renovate and improve the lives of men in transition.
We see people on the bottom end who have come in here in desperate situations. There are really no more shelters really for men. There's just no money and energy into that. So this is an exception that way.
So when we had the opportunity, we really wanted to step up and do this particular project.
People really did jump at this opportunity, like with no questions asked. A lot of people went above what their original scope was.
This is an old historic home. This home dates all the way back to when James Madison was president. The construction of such an old house with the renovation going on, with all of the people that live here, plus the food pantry, really was a complicated process.
I'm still overwhelmed by the stuff that's happened here. It's more peaceful. The way that they painted and the stuff that they did without disturbing any of my stuff, that takes respect to do what they did for us.
The people that are being helped here, this is going to make a tremendous difference. If it's a dumpy place, it's not transformative. It just kind of cues them as another thing in the long line of places that just aren't going to lift them up. So this allows us to be congruent with what we're trying to do. This is not just window dressing. This is really creating this place we call Christ House. Lives will be transformed here, and many more will be in much better shape because of the transformation you've done for us.
It's important to note that this was about an $83,000 project, and between the trades and between K. Hovnanian and between HomeAid, this was 100% donated.
I think it's really cool, one, that I could be a part of a project like this, that there exists an organization that does this kind of thing, and I'm glad that my company could step up. I'd love to do it again.
The work that they did is astounding. Thank you, HomeAid. We really, really, really appreciate y'all work.
Thank you, HomeAid, from all of us out there who live in here.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us here this morning in this virtual setting. For those that I have not had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Kristen Burr, and I have the honor of serving as the Executive Director and CEO of HomeAid Northern Virginia. And although we are incredibly bummed that we are not in a room sharing space with all of you again this year, we are thrilled that you're here today from near and far to listen, absorb, and then hopefully take some of these things away for yourself and to share with others. Many of you already know the core work that HomeAid does. We have partnered with many of you already. And as you saw from our Christ House video, our mission is to build and renovate housing and programmatic facilities for service providers who are working hard day in and day out to support those in our area who are experiencing homelessness or who would otherwise be homeless. We would not, shelter supported wraparound programming in Northern Virginia. And as of January, we expanded to Winchester, which is really exciting. We leverage our relationships with the local home building industry to provide free or substantially reduced construction on the homes and facilities that you own and use for families and individuals struggling in this area. These upgraded spaces provide safe, stable, and dignified places for people to heal and move forward. Since 2001, this is our 19th year. Since 2001, HomeAid Nova has completed 150 projects. We're actually wrapping up our 150th project right now in Winchester. These projects are valued at more than $18 million in substantial improvements to the facilities and housing stock that you own and or operate programs out of. Over 11 million of that amount has been seen as savings to you, our nonprofit partners, which allowed the critical funding that you do have to be redirected into programs and services instead of into construction needs. Already this year, we have completed 4 projects and 3 turnovers valued at over $400,000. We have 12 more projects in the pipeline, but we did those projects already this year with an actual cost to the providers that we did them for around $65,000 for all of them combined, which is a savings of 85% of the retail construction costs. As you can imagine, our projects vary widely in scope, with some being as small as a kitchen and bathroom renovation in a townhome, and some are much, much larger, including the ground up build of a 5,000 square foot group home, or the extensive renovation of multifamily affordable housing. More detailed information, before and after photos, tons of before and after photos, as well as the application can be found on our website if you're interested. And we have a couple other program offerings that I do want to highlight today because I don't always get this platform to tell you about them. And so it's imperative that I do today. We have another program, which I mentioned a couple seconds ago, called a turnover program. This is a program that was piloted in 2018 after a conversation with another housing provider discussing the wear and tear and the challenges associated with turning over housing units in between clients. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. So this is a program that just does paint and flooring. It's all we offer for this particular program. It's completely funded by HomeAid, and we don't rely on donations for the reason that we want it to happen as quickly as possible within a few weeks. We do this with the intention of turning that flooring over. We will rip up carpet and use vinyl planking, which extends the life of the flooring by 10 to 15 years, which saves the organizations money over the life of that unit. To date, so since 2018, we've completed 19 of these turnovers for a total HomeAid investment of nearly $100,000. 100% of that was seen as savings to the nonprofits who own those spaces. And again, that application and more information on our website if you're interested, or if you think you have units that might be able to participate. Lastly, for those that are familiar, for 9 years, we hosted our Night at the Ballpark event in partnership with the Potomac Nationals. This was an event for our partner service organizations to invite their staff and clients for a stress-free night out completely funded by HomeAid. When the Potomac Nationals moved to Fredericksburg last year after our final event, we created a new partnership with Wolf Trap to really offer a similar experience, and we were so excited about it. And so this event was scheduled originally for July 20th, and unfortunately, like a lot of other things, had to be canceled for 2020 because of COVID, but we are working with them, and we have been working with them to get it on the calendar for the summer of 2021. So we provide event tickets, parking, and lunch, all again funded by HomeAid, and we would love to see you and your clients there. So more information will be sent out in the spring, so make sure you keep your eyes out for that. We as an organization are continuously looking to make a stronger impact in the Northern Virginia and Winchester communities, and to better serve our shelter partners and our nonprofit organization partners to ensure that everyone who's experiencing homelessness and needs that hand up is able to get the services they require and a place to live and heal and move forward. We are here to learn from you about how we can play a more meaningful role in the work that you do. So do not hesitate. Please, please reach out to me with project ideas, renovation, construction needs, or even collaborations that you think we can help support. We exist. Our entire mission is to support you. Again, thank you for being here today. With that, I have just a couple logistics that I want to share. One is that I want to share the agenda with you just so you can, if you want to just check that out to see when the presentations, and that there'll be a Q&A after each of the speakers. I want to mention that we'll be sending out a very short survey tomorrow, also with resources and stuff that will be sent out tomorrow. So we urge you, we love feedback, not just for this event, usually which we have the energy of being in person, and unfortunately, but this topic is so important, we needed to bring it to you in a virtual setting. But speakers, I love to hear from you and understand what is relevant and what is important and what can we bring to the table for everyone. And then just to mention that chat will be disabled, but we will be using Q&A for all the questions after the presentation. This is an anonymous way for us to field questions to the speakers. So now it is my pleasure to introduce you to our current board president and executive vice president of commercial real estate lending at John Marshall Bank, Jason McDonough, who is going to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. I appreciate it. As Kristen mentioned, I'm the Executive Vice President, Director of Commercial Real Estate Lending at John Marshall Bank. But more importantly, I have the distinct honor and privilege of serving as the HomeAid Northern Virginia Board President this year. 2020 has been an extremely interesting year. I certainly did not know we would be navigating a pandemic when I signed on as president this year. But no matter what sector we are in, especially the nonprofit sector, the needs and challenges have been exacerbated by all the unintended consequences of the pandemic. HomeAid is no different. In fact, construction has been considered essential through the pandemic, and we currently have more projects in our pipeline than we ever had before. As you all can relate, I'm sure, we've had to get creative with fundraising and appreciation events, and working remotely with for almost half the year, it is certainly a challenging time. But we are doing it. We're doing it well. We're doing it the best that we can, and it's making us stronger as an organization. That's for sure. We could not do what we do without the tremendous support of the building community and beyond, nor would any of this be possible without the amazing HomeAid team here with us today. You met Kristen Burr, Executive Director and CEO, but also on the call, Silda Pretorius, our Events and Operations Manager, and also Madeline Walker, Program and Communications Specialist. I also want to thank our amazingly generous and committed board of directors, which consists of 35 individuals that are in and around the building industry that have supported this organization in and out, year in, year out. Thank you, thank you, thank you for dedicating your time, your attention, your resources, and your talents to this amazing organization, furthering the mission of HomeAid to help those in our community, one life at a time. At this point in the program, I'd like to thank the Bank of America Charitable Foundation in particular. They have been crucial in helping us fund and grow this forum over the last several years, and have been incredibly grateful. We are incredibly grateful for all of their support. With that, I would like to sincerely thank them for their generous contribution again this year, which helps us bring this event and these experts directly to you. So once again, Bank of America Charitable Foundation, thank you so much. This is the 10th year that we're able to bring the Housing Forum to nonprofit partners in the greater community, which has always been a platform to help facilitate networking and discussion of relevant industry topics. We recognize that budgets are tight, staff time is indispensable, so we are proud to offer this forum as an alternative to expensive national conferences, while still offering programmatic contributions from local experts. And since national conferences aren't happening, we're able to offer this forum virtually. We're able to welcome a wide audience from all across the country. This year's topics highlight a national crisis that's been evident since prior to COVID. Now more than ever, there is a significant need to address the stigma and prevalence of mental health and self-care. On behalf of HomeAid, we are proud to bring the experts to you. With that, I'd like to welcome and introduce our event facilitator, Dean Klein. Since April 2020, Dean has served as Chief Strategist for Health and Housing and Human Services in the Office of the County Executive in Fairfax County. Previously, Mr. Klein served as the Founding Director of the Office to Prevent and End Homelessness in Fairfax County after being appointed by the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors in 2009. Dean oversaw the work of the Fairfax Falls Church Community Partnership to prevent and end homelessness until March of 2020. And prior to working in the Office to Prevent and End Homelessness, he served as the Senior Community Relationship Manager at the Freddie Mac Foundation, where he oversaw the foundation's largest focus area, the Stable Homes Families portfolio. Prior to that, he served as the Executive Director at both Doorways for Women and Families in Arlington and at Shelter House in Fairfax County. Please welcome Dean Klein as our event facilitator. Take it away, Dean.
Thank you very much. In fact, my video is not working right now, so I'm going to go a little incognito right now until I'm able to sort of get that switched on. But I am thrilled to be with you here today. Here we go. Hopefully you can see me now. I'm just thrilled to be here with you today for the Housing Forum. I think that it's just a wonderful morning ahead of us, and it's great to be able to be part of this and to be able to introduce several amazing speakers, Kevin Hines as well as Gina White, and you will get to know them and hear from them in just a few moments. If you have not completed the poll that was provided to you, please go ahead and do the pre-presentation poll for Kevin. We really are very interested in hearing from you and understanding what you're thinking today coming into this exciting presentation. After each presentation, we'll go through a Q&A. And so again, Kristen had mentioned this to you. Please go ahead and just post those questions, and I'll be able to field those and be able to help our speakers answer those questions as we're moving forward. Finally, we will have a 5-minute break in between speakers, so plan ahead and hopefully take that time just to stretch and get regrouped for our second exciting speaker. So let me go ahead and introduce our first speaker, Kevin Hines, who's a brain health advocate and storyteller, a dynamic individual who's an award-winning suicide prevention advocate, entrepreneur, multiple award-winning filmmaker, author, educator, and so you'll know him a little bit later, but you will also hear that 2 years after he was diagnosed with bipolar at age 19, he attempted to take his life by jumping from the Golden Gate Bridge. He'll give you details about that, but there's so many more things that I want to share with you about Kevin. In the summer of 2013, he released his best-selling memoir titled Back Not Broken, Surviving and Thriving After a Suicide Attempt. He's won numerous awards, including the Clifford W. Beers Award for his efforts to improve the lives and attitudes towards people with mental illness. He also executive produced and directed multiple award-winning documentary films, Suicide, The Ripple Effect, about the impact of suicides on families and loved ones. He's received Lifetime Achievement Awards, and he's received other recognition. But I just wanted to just sort of be able to close my introduction with you just by noting, certainly you've seen him on the critically acclaimed film, The Bridge, by the film director and producer Eric Steele. He's been on CNN, Time Magazine, New York Times has featured him, The Today Show, etc. But Kevin believes in the power of the human spirit and in the fact that you can find the ability to live mentally well. His mantra is, life is a gift. That is why they call it the present. Cherish it always. Let me go ahead now and introduce you to Kevin Hines.
Are you okay? Is something wrong? Or can I help you? Those were the words that I desperately wanted to hear right before I catapulted myself over the rail. I have now lived 15 years past the day I should have died.
When you see a lot of mental illness being expressed, that's a clue that the culture is sick, not the person.
Hey, brother.
Hello, Kevin.
You were the first person to ever say, you know, Kevin, you should talk about this.
Our guest, Kevin Hines, plummeted 200 feet but survived.
Today, I traveled the globe spreading a message of hope. Why? Because we know it helps people heal.
There's a huge opportunity as we talk about stories of survival to support people who are out there who are in pain.
I break down on a regular basis. I have symptoms every day. I still have hallucinations, both auditory and visual.
Families of those who jumped from the iconic structure urged to stop the suicides.
One person goes to this bridge to die every 7 to 10 days. I think it's our obligation to stop it.
You go to Paris, go to New York, you go to Istanbul, there are suicide barriers. The more people that know about the horror of that bridge, the more pressure will be put to do something to stop it.
Will this really decrease suicides, you think?
They say things like, why ruin the aesthetics? What are the aesthetics of a bridge compared to one human life?
Kevin, Kevin Hines, there's no telling how many lives were saved by you because you weren't able to take your own.
Let's get to that place that nobody is being brave who talks about their brain disease. They're just being honest. My name is Kevin Hines, and this is my story. Okay. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I greatly appreciate being a part of this event for HomeAid. It means the world to me. And may I begin with sharing all of you with my story. It begins where all stories begin, the day we were all born. I was born August 30th, 1981, in the great city of San Francisco in the beautiful state of California. I was born to biological parents Marcia and Martino. Martino was half Mexican and half Italian, and Marcia was everything under the sun. And she and he had two infant boys named Jordash and Giovanni. My biological name was Giovanni. I was born to birth parents who sadly, after they had me and my brother, succumbed to the disease of substance use disorder, or what we call addiction. They used, scored, and sold drugs. They would frankly leave me and my brother unattended to go do these things. They would leave us lying there on over a concrete slab floor on barely a box spring for a mattress in seedy motels in the Tenderloin of San Francisco, the worst neighborhood there then, the worst neighborhood there today. One fateful day, one seedy motel clerk made his most unseedy decision. He heard our screams and our cries in his mind 120 times, and he called the police. We were being neglected. We were being fed what mom and dad could steal. Kool-Aid, Coca-Cola, and sour milk was our diet. I had a bruise from the top of my sternum to the bottom of my abdomen from being malnourished, and a distended belly to date. I was really going through it. We bounced around from home to home in foster care, having a new mom and dad every couple of weeks or days, until we both got a vicious strain of bronchitis and my only full-blooded brother died. This sent me into a spin. I developed a severe detachment disorder from reality and abandonment issues that follow me until today. Every time somebody I love dies, I feel like they're leaving me on purpose, and I can't shake it no matter how much therapy I do. And I do a lot of therapy. I would bounce around from home to home, but thankfully, I'd land in the home of Peter and Deborah Muller. Peter was in the Army, and as he often had to be restationed, the foster kids he and his wife Debbie took care of had to be repositioned in different foster homes. They were a transitional home for kids. Many kids in their house at the same time. 3 or 4 little girls, 4 or 5 little boys. And one fateful day, a lovely young woman named Deborah Joan Hines walked in their door. Now, you know my name is Kevin Hines, so this works out. Spoiler alert. But Debbie Hines walked in their door. She wasn't looking for a little boy to take home. She was looking for a little girl to be the sister of Elizabeth Catherine, the girl she and Patrick Kevin Hines had already taken in. They wanted to give Elizabeth a sister. Do I look like a sister to you? Well, Debbie walked in that door, and the first thing she saw on the carpeted floor before her was then wavy, red-headed, auburn-haired Giovanni, me, in my famous red rubber ducky overalls. And she said in her journal of those days, which is how I know about this story, that was the moment she fell in love. And she went back to Patrick Hines, and he said, let's do it. Let's take him in. He needs us. And I desperately needed them. And they took me in at 9 months of age. For the next 30 days, I was violently ill, all day, every day. Doctor after doctor, specialist after specialist, no one could tell Pat and Debbie what was wrong with their new-to-be son. Until one fateful day, a doctor came forward and said, Patrick and Deborah, there's nothing physically wrong with your child. it's all emotional, which was frankly the furthest thing from the truth. You see, when I had been fed Kool-Aid, Coca-Cola, and sour milk, my gut to brain health was so very poor that my eating habits were directly affecting me mentally, even at 9 months of age. As we all know, the first 3 to 9 months of an infant's life are the most crucial for their ability to connect, adapt, and attach and be well in any future. And if the first 3 to 9 months of your life are filled with nothing but consistent trauma, at some point, something's got to give and you're going to have a heck of a hard time. In the Hines home, it was a beautiful experience. Unconditional love, care every day, the greatest of holidays. And I thought to myself growing up, how could anything go sideways from here? I'm going to get older. I'm going to get into that great school my dad's always talking about. I'm going to get that wonderful job he's always speaking of. And I'm going to do this because I've been given opportunity, unlike so many. But that didn't happen. At 17 and a half years of age, I had a complete and total mental breakdown. I vividly remember this breakdown. I was standing on a stage at Archbishop Reardon High School, performing in a theater show called How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. I was playing a character they called Gatch. Gatch was a philandering businessman. That meant he had the wife at home, but he was messing around with all the secretaries at the office. That guy. And I'm playing this character. And I'm wearing one of my father Patrick's old suits and ties, which was no small feat. Pat Hines is 6'1", and I'm not. They sort of hemmed the suit to fit me. And I'm standing on that stage, and I'm looking out into a crowd of 1,200 people, and not one seat was open. It was packed. The theater director, Mr. John Fennell, is sitting in the very back row on the last seat to the left-hand side. And I'm on that stage on opening night, and I'm playing my character. And I look out into this crowd, and I start to believe in a fit of paranoid delusion that every single one of the 1,200 people there were going to simultaneously rise, rush the stage, and end my life. I panicked. I ran off stage. I ran to the lobby. I was met there with Mr. John Fennell. He said, "Kevin, what are you doing? It's not even intermission yet. Can you please finish the performance?" I was a mess. I couldn't make 3 words in a row make sense. He called my mom. He would go on to play my role for the remainder of the night. My mother came to pick me up, and I will never forget the look in her eyes as she gazed into mine. I saw that she saw within mine the depths of insanity brewing behind them. You see, I've been acting erratically. I'd certainly been unwell prior to this day, but nobody knew why, and nobody knew the extent of it. Why? Because I was hiding and burying my pain. I was pretending to be okay in front of everyone. You see, prior to that night on that stage, I had been having hallucinations, auditory and visual, seeing and hearing things that nobody else can see or hear, but believing them to be real. I was having hallucinations every single night of Death himself hovering through my window with his staff and blade, his scythe in his right bony arm, reaching out his other bony hand, turning it upside down as his eyes lit to fire in his skull face as he would say, "Come on with me." This was a regular occurrence, Monday through Monday, but I didn't tell anyone. It was terrifying. After my mom picked me up, very soon thereafter, I saw my first psychiatrist. His name was Dr. J. Kevin Rist. Dr. Rist was a nice man. He cared about his patients, but he was also having a hard time. He was having his own brain pain. He was considered one of the best in the field in San Francisco, California. My parents had searched long and hard to find him. I was seeing him twice a week. He put me on medications for bipolar disorder, type 1 with psychotic features. But he put me on too many medications. They were toxifying my brain and making me worse. It turned out Dr. Rist was on methamphetamines the entire time he treated me and his other patients. Now, this is not indicative to psychiatrists in the field of medicine. Psychiatrists in the field of medicine has helped save my life for the better part of 20 years. Dr. Rist was in his own pain. He needed help and he wasn't getting it. Dr. Rist and John Fennell, the theater director, would both take their lives later on. 2 people I really cared for. The first 2 people I would ever be directly connected to that I lost to suicide. After seeing Dr. Rist, I would cycle up into a manic euphoric natural high, and I'd come crashing down to the dark abysses of depression on a weekly basis. I was a mess. On my 18th birthday, my mom kicked me out and asked me to go live with my father. It was horrible. The most optimistic woman I've ever known in my entire life lost her optimism for me. And you know what? I don't blame her. It had a lot to do with me punching lots of holes in her drywalls in her house. I went to live with my dad at 18. All we did was butt heads every single day, fighting tooth and nail, screaming matches all day long because of my brain disease, because I was so unwell mentally. The brain pain was clear. But my father, Patrick, didn't know what to do. Nobody taught Pat Hines about mental health. Nobody taught Pat Hines about suicide prevention. The months and weeks went on. At 19 years of age, in the month of September, I couldn't bear the brunt of my pain and my depression any longer. On September 24th of the year 2000, I would write that note. A note to my mom and my dad, my brother and my sister, and my best friend Jake Lewis, and my girlfriend at the time. I wrote that note, Mom, I love you, but you're not always right. Dad, I love you too, but stop bringing the office home. This isn't work. I said to my little brother Joseph, who wanted to be nothing more than the greatest DJ on the West Coast, to be a household name. I said to my sister Elizabeth, who wanted to make films, go get it, you got this. I said to my best friend Jake, arguably the worst part of the entire note, you'll find another best friend. As if that's remotely how it works. I put that note in my shoulder bag. I put that shoulder bag by my door. At 6 a.m, I entered my father Patrick's room. He lay there wearing his sleeping apparatus, his breathing machine for sleep apnea, snoring while on the breathing machine, which doesn't make any sense. It's supposed to keep you from snoring. Nonetheless, he sounded like Darth Vader snoring. I startled my dad awake. He took off his mask immediately, turned to me, looked at his end clock on the table and said, Kevin, what's wrong? I wanted to tell him the truth. I wanted to tell the one man who loved me the most in the entire world everything. But the voices in my head would win the day. Kevin, be quiet. Kevin, you have to die by your hands. You're useless, Kevin. You have no value. You're an idiot, Kevin. Be quiet, Kevin. Be silent. You have to die. And as I said, those voices would almost win the day. I said, nothing's wrong, Dad. I just wanted to tell you that I love you. In my mind, it was for the very last time. He looked at me and said, Kev, I love you too. But it's 6 a.m. and I don't have to be at work until 9, go back to bed. And he put his mask back on. And he fell soundly asleep as quickly as he had been awoken. I walked around to the other side of the bed. I sat on the carpeted floor at the corner of that bed, rocking my body back and forth in tears, begging myself not to do what I was about to do, not to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge, the ninth wonder of the world, what some people call the most beautiful man-made structure ever created, also a harbinger of death. At 6:30, I went back to my room. At 7 a.m., my father entered. He said, Kevin, I'm very worried about you and I don't know what to do. Why don't you come to work with me today? I said, Dad, I can't. I've got to be at City College today. He said, Kev, we'll go to the beach. I said, no, Dad, can't do it. He said, Kev, we'll go to the movies. Dad, I'm too busy. Kev, we'll do whatever you want. I just feel like you need to be with me today. And there it was. He was so close. He knew something was up, but he didn't know what. And like I said earlier, nobody taught Pat Hines suicide prevention. Nobody taught Pat Hines that in these situations, when you're unsure of your child's mental well-being or your loved one for that matter, ask the direct, blunt, and honest question, are you thinking of killing yourself? Have you made plans to take your life? It doesn't put the thought in someone's mind if they're already suicidal or if they're not. It does give someone who is suicidal permission to speak on their pain. How could my father know this if no one taught him? So what happened next was not any way, shape, or form his fault. There's too much blame game played when there are lives lost to suicide anyway. And usually that blame lies on no one. My father finally said to me, Kev, why don't we do this? You seem like you've calmed down, because I made myself. I took those welling tears in my eyes and I pushed them back down. He said, Kev, why don't we do this? I'll take you to City College. You take the bus home. I'll see you home at 6 tonight. Sounds good, Dad. Me knowing full well I was going to the GGB and I would never be coming home. Or so I thought. I got in my father's car. He was talking the whole ride, which is rare. Patrick Hines speaks when spoken to. I talk all the time, and I was silent. I gripped my shoulder back to my chest because I didn't want him to find the note inside. We got to this City College corner of the campus. My father turned to me and said one of his favorite mantras, Kevin, I love you, be careful. The man said it every day. He even calls me today just to say it. I said, I love you too, Dad. I stepped out of the car with my right foot and I stood. A tear rolled down my right cheek, off my chin, and landed on my lugs boot on the middle shoelace. I will never forget that moment as long as I shall live. I watched my father drive away. I said to myself, that's the very last time I'm ever going to see anybody I love, and the very last time anybody I love is ever going to see me. And me being completely content to die by lethal emotional pain from suicide. I walked onto the campus of City College. I walked into the counselor's department. I found the most readily available counselor. I asked her to drop me 9.5 of my 12.5 scholastic units at the college. Without batting an eye, without asking me one question, she dropped those courses. They've since changed their policy to ask a lot of questions when these things occur. I walked into my only remaining class, English, and people have asked me why. Why did you drop 9.5 units but keep English? Well, it wasn't because I was planning on becoming some literary master. Sure, I wrote a book, but there are 36 errors in the opening acknowledgments alone. Nonetheless, I went into English class for one reason. Teacher was gorgeous, and I just wanted to see her one last time. It would be the only rational thing I did all day. I left that class early. I got onto a Muni train, and I sat next to a reflective glass. I looked in that reflective glass, and I saw what tortured me inside. The man in the mirror, if you will, who hated me so much and made it so well aware. Inside my head, this battle going on, a battle royale, this hatred, this spitefulness, this self-loathing. The voice in my head said that I have to die, that I had no choice, that it was my only option. I wish I knew back then what I know today, that my thoughts do not have to become my actions. Frankly, our thoughts do not have to become our actions. Suicidal ideation and suicidal thoughts are the greatest liars we know. We don't have to abide by them. What we must do in those times of pain is turn to the first person in front of us and say 4 simple but effective words. I need help now. And if the first person you ask that to is unwilling to help you, you turn to your right, you turn to your left, you keep searching until you find someone willing to empathize with your struggle, with your strife, and with your pain. Because you deserve this life until your natural end. And suicide never has to be the solution to your problem. Frankly, it is the problem. On that day, on that Muni train, the train got to a certain area where I could take a bus to the bridge. I walked across that space and I boarded that next bus. I sat in the very back row, in the middle seat, looking out upon everyone, hoping, wishing, and praying that one person would see me, see my pain, and say something kind. Hey kid, are you okay? Brother, is something wrong? Pal, can I help you? And I would have told them everything and begged them to save me. No, I couldn't tell my father that morning, but on that bus, all I wanted was for someone to stop me. I couldn't reach out personally. I couldn't say it first. I needed someone to reach in. And there's a lesson to be learned here. When you see the next person you come across in lethal emotional pain, crying, sobbing, emotionally unwell, potentially, don't hesitate to look them in the eyes. and say, are you okay? You could be the impetus to augmenting a destiny. You could save a life. The bus went on, and I began to cry, softly, and then moderately, and then waterfalls flew from my eyes and mucus dripped from my nose. And that's when I began to yell aloud on a crowded bus filled with about 100 people. Leave me alone, but I don't want to die. I'm a good person. Why do you hate me so much? What did I ever do to you? Now, if they weren't before, 100 people are looking down the barrel of the bus at me but saying nothing, except for one man. The man to my left says to the fellow next to him, while pointing me with his thumb, with a smile on his face, what the hell is wrong with that kid? And that, my new friends at HomeAid, is what's wrong with some of society today. This innate human ability to see somebody, anyone, in that kind of pain and feel complete apathy toward them. That's his or her problem. It ain't mine. I got things to do, people to see, and places to go. I formidably disagree with this ideal. I believe, my friends, if we are nothing else on this beautiful planet, we are at the very least supposed to be one thing together. Our brothers and sisters keepers. We are here for a sole purpose in life, to give back to those in need. Those we know, those we don't know, from Adam, and those we don't even like. What we are not here to do is hurt each other or damage each other with our words or actions. You at HomeAid know that all too well. You guys serve those in need every single day. You keep people safe, well, happy, and balanced. And that's a beautiful thing. And you do that by sharing homes and places of residence and the gift of safety every day. And I'm grateful. The bus got to the Golden Gate Bridge parking lot, and everybody deboarded right there. 100 people off that bus right there, except for me. I sobbed my eyes out, hoping the driver would see my pain and be the person I needed him to be in that moment. Instead, he said, "Come on, kid, get off the bus. I got to go." I walked right up to that man, looked him right in his eyes as he gazed into mine, waterfalls flowing from them, and he motioned for me to get off the bus. I walked down the 2 steps that felt like 2,000. I walked across the entire stretch of walkway that is the Golden Gate Bridge, crying my eyes out. I walked up and down the Golden Gate Bridge walkway for 40 minutes crying, hoping someone would see my pain. And that's when a woman from my left approached me. She had blonde curly hair and giant sunglasses on, the kind you ladies love to wear that don't fit your face. And she approached with a smile. I thought, this is it. This is my safety. She's going to ask me if I'm okay. I don't have to do this. I don't have to die today. And then she pulled out a digital camera and said, "Will you take my picture?" It broke my heart, but it wasn't her fault. I took her picture several times. She took her camera, she said thank you, and she walked away. When she walked away, I said to myself, absolutely no one cares, which was the furthest thing from the truth. Everybody cared. All of my friends, all of my acquaintances, my family would have been there to rip me from that rail to safety if they knew where I was and what I was doing. Everybody cared. My brain wasn't allowing me to care. My brain was trying to kill me as I desperately tried to cling to life. I truly wish I knew at that moment that my thoughts did not have to become my actions. Upon her leaving, and me thinking nobody cares, the voice in my head, the auditory hallucination, beckoned at decimals I can't express to you without piercing eardrums, jumped now, and I did. I catapulted myself over that rail. It was the millisecond that my hands left that rail and my legs cleared it that I had an instantaneous regret for my actions and the 100% recognition that I just made the greatest mistake of my life and it was too late. For 99% of those who've leapt off the Golden Gate Bridge, it's been too late. 99% of them never get to tell their stories ever again. 1% have survived that fall. Instant regret is felt by millions of people around the world who have survived suicide attempts. They talk about it all the time. It's been very well recorded because you recognize in that moment that your thoughts didn't have to own, rule, or define your next action, and that suicide was not the answer. I fell 220 feet, 25 stories at 75 miles an hour in 4 seconds. And these were the thoughts that rang true in my mind. What have I just done? I don't want to die. God, please save me. I hit that water. I went down 70 feet beneath the water's surface, and I opened my eyes. I was alive, and I was drowning. You know, it never occurred to me on the bridge that by jumping off into the water that I might drown. It just goes to show you the illogical and irrational nature of suicide. That never once crossed my mind. And I was drowning. I started swimming in the wrong direction. I was going down. My ears began to ring. My eyes began to bulge. I shot for the surface. I couldn't feel my legs. Upon impact, I had shattered my T12, L1, L2 lower vertebrae into shards like glass. I missed severing my spinal cord by 2 millimeters. I broke the surface of the water, bowed up and down in it, and prayed, God, please save me. I don't want to die. I made a mistake. God, please save me. I don't want to die. I made a mistake. Several things came into play to save my life that day. A woman driving by in a red car saw me go over the rail and called her friend in the Coast Guard. The singular reason the Coast Guard officer got there in time was because of that woman who saw me go over the rail at the moment in which she did. The Coast Guard got to me within a 3-minute window before I would set in hypothermia and drown because of that woman's phone call. In the water, as I flailed to stay afloat, something began to circle beneath me, something large and slimy and very, very alive. And I remember thinking to myself, you've got to be kidding me. I didn't die jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, and now a shark is going to eat me. I started to punch this thing with my only good arm. It wouldn't go away. I was freaking out. It turned out it was no shark. A year later, I was on a TV show called ABC's Primetime Live with a man named John Quinones. On that show, I said I thought there was a shark beneath me in the water. People wrote into the show from all over the world. One man's letter stuck out above all the rest. His name was Morgan McWard, and this is what he wrote to me. Kevin, I'm so very glad you're alive. I was standing less than 2 feet away from you when you jumped. Until this day, watching the show, no one would tell me whether you lived or died. It's haunted me until now. By the way, Kevin, there was no shark like you mentioned on the show, but there absolutely was a sea lion. And the people above, looking down, believed it to be keeping your body afloat until the Coast Guard boat arrived behind you. To me, that's nothing short of a miracle. I'm so very glad I got to live that day. I'm so grateful to exist any day. I'm grateful just to be. Become one of the 1% to survive such a fall. 39 people in 83 years have survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. To date, many have died of natural causes and old age. About 26 of us remain alive today. But only 5 of us have regained full physical mobility. They actually call us the most exclusive survivors club in the world. There's a book of the same name by Ben Sherwood about our story. I'm making a point. I get to be here. And getting to be here is a privilege and a gift, no matter the pain you're in. You see, my new friends, pain is inevitable. It's coming for all of us if it hasn't already. But suffering is optional. It's a choice. We can choose to hold gratitude in the pain and defeat it brick by brick from the ground up by building a new way of life, a new way of coping with pain, a new strategy for your mental well-being. That's what I do every day.
It wasn't easy after the Golden Gate Bridge. I went from the ambulance to the hospital where I had a 10.5-hour back surgery to replace my shattered vertebrae with metal. I've got a cylindrical titanium cage of mesh wiring, 4 pins the size of my index finger, a metal plate the size of my palm to my left side. The singular reason I get to stand, walk, and run today. I'm so grateful for that ability. In that hospital, I went from a wheelchair to a walker and a back brace to a back brace and a cane, and then right into my first psych ward. It was in that psych ward that I had my first epiphany. Brother George Cherry, a Franciscan friar, came to me, and he was the chaplain of the hospital. This was a guy who always looked at the chart to see who he was talking to before he'd walk in. But for some unknown reason, he felt compelled just to walk into my room and interrupt. I was putting on my back brace and I was leaning on my cane. He said, "Hey kid, what are you in for?" I said, "Well, brother, I jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge." He said, "Yeah, and I'm the Pope." He didn't believe me. He thought I was delusional. I said, "No, brother, that's what happened. That's why the back brace. That's why the cane." He said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I feel so terrible. Let's pray." And he came over to my left side. He put his right hand on my forehead, and he had the rosary in his left hand. And we prayed a prayer I'm all too familiar with, an Our Father and a Hail Mary. Then he looked at me and he said, "Son, when you get better, you want to talk about this?" And I said, about what to who? I didn't know what he meant. He said, "You'll see." Every day, Brother George Cherry would come in. Every day we'd pray together. Every day he would say to me, "When you get better, you want to talk about this." Every day I would ignore him and brush it off my shoulders. On the final day of my stay in the psych ward, he said, "Kevin, I expect you'll talk about this." I said, "Okay, brother, sure." And I kind of went like this in my mind. What a bunch of nonsense, I thought. What does he mean? Who would that help? After I got out of the hospital, about 7 months after my attempt, in 2001, my father took me to church, the church I grew up in as a kid, the church my wife and I would get married at later. Father Michael Harriman, soon to be turned Monsignor, walked out of the service and said, "Kevin, how would you like to come and share your experience to our 7th and 8th grade class this Good Friday?" I turned around with my hobbling on my cane and moving slowly with my back brace. I said, "Father, I don't have a speech and I wouldn't know what to say." And that's when my dad shoved me forward and said, "He'll do it." I turned around, looked at my dad. He said, "You'll do it. We need closure." I said, "You need closure? I need to go home and lay down." He said, "You'll do it. When Pat Hines says things twice, you do it. He's 6'1" and I'm not." And so on Good Friday, I wrote a speech till 3 a.m. that day, not mentally healthy. My dad edited it that morning. By 9 o'clock, we were at the rectory, ready to speak to the kids. I had my speech, 17 pages to read aloud, 45 minutes to read. Holding my cane, wearing my back brace over my shirt. I was terrified. They said to begin. I'm dropping page by page to the floor with one hand, holding onto my cane with the other. I'm crying my eyes out. It's raw. It's emotional. I'm a mess. I'm thinking to myself, who is this helping? Why am I doing this? What a joke. I finish and drop the last page to the floor. And that's when it happens. 8 inquisitive hands go up immediately. The first question was inappropriate. The nun yelled out, "Don't answer that." I said I wasn't going to. The next 7 questions were intelligent, empowering, and important questions. I answered them all to the best of my ability. And it was in that moment that I knew quite clearly I'd made an impact. I went home. 2 weeks later, Father Michael Harriman called me to the rectory. He said he had something for me. I hucked it up 2 miles to the school. My dad was at work. So I walked with my cane up 2 miles, sweating profusely through my back brace. I got to the rectory. I sat down, took my inhaler for my asthma right in front of the father. He looked at me and he handed me a manila envelope filled with a folder. The folder was a hand-drawn Sacred Heart of Jesus in colored pencils. I opened it. 120 letters from 120 kids. Now, I'm no fool. Those kids were mandated to write those letters. They didn't all get together and go, let's all write to the suicidal guy simultaneously. No, they did it because they were told to. But they weren't given parameters on what they could or could not write. They were told to write to their heart's content. This was very smart by the teachers. Because they were minors, the teachers had the right to screen those letters. And they found out that several of the kids were actively suicidal. And they were able to give them and their families the help they needed. And those kids are alive today. When my father read these letters, he turned to me and he said, Kevin, we have to do this however, wherever, and whenever possible. And we never stopped. I would go from speaking at one grade school to 300 speeches a year in just a few years, traveling the world, sharing my story of hope, healing, and recovery, letting people know that suicide is not the answer to the problem, it is the problem, making them aware that things like bipolar disorder, depression, mental illness, eating disorders are not a death sentence, that you can recover from them. You can find hope in the light at the end of every tunnel. And if you don't think hope is there, remember this. It does exist. You just haven't walked far enough to reach it. It wasn't easy after the Golden Gate Bridge jump. I didn't just miraculously get better and feel great for the rest of my life. I've been down a long and arduous road to recovery, one which I am still in today. As a matter of fact, I've been in 9 psych ward stays in the last 14 years, the last of which was just a year and a half ago, all for suicidal thoughts and ideations. 9 psych ward stays. It was in my 5th psych ward stay that I would be given 26 treatments of electroconvulsive therapy. The norm is 12. They doubled that for my situation because of how bad my suicidal thoughts were. But it did retrain my brain. And that was in 2011. From 2011 till until 2019, I was out of psych wards. It was 2019 where I had to go back in. I didn't want to. It broke my heart that I've been doing so well for so long, and I had to succumb to the pain once more. But I had learned over time to be forgiving of myself going through such things. We all have to recognize our true value. We all have to recognize that we're worthy to be here, that we deserve this life until our natural end, and that suicide never has to be the solution to our problem. It never has to lead us down that dark path. It's taken me a long time to find a routine and wellness regimen to balance my brain health. It was in my 3rd psych ward stay that I had my second epiphany and a gift. The gift would come in the meeting of my soon-to-be wife, Margaret Hines. She was there visiting her cousin, who was there for methamphetamine use. He was catatonic, and it was me who helped him get out of his catatonia. He couldn't move or talk, and I would simply talk to him every day to try to elicit a response, and I eventually did. In that 3rd psych ward stay, I was lucky enough to have my Uncle George come to visit me outside of visiting hours. He comes in one day, and I remember it vividly. He said, Kevin, your family can help you until you're blue in the face, but until and when you take 100% responsibility for the fact that you have this disease and you fight it tooth and nail every day, kid, ain't nothing going to change. You'll be in and out of these places for the rest of your life. He had a rolled up Time magazine in his hand. He dropped the magazine on the table and he said, read it. It was a Time magazine article in 2004 on how to battle bipolar disorder and depression and mental illness with routine and regimen and win. I looked at this article and I thought, you're telling me that I can read this article, act on these steps and tools and tricks for mental health, wellness, and I can feel better? And I sat there wondering, why didn't my first 3 psychiatrists tell me this? I read the article through and through, and then I read it one more time. I put words into action the very next day. I went to my case managers and my nurses. I said, look, I'd really like to use your gym facility. They said, son, this is a psych ward. There's no gym here. I said, well, every psych ward should have a gym. It's in the magazine. And I said, okay, no gym. So I realized I was a WCAL wrestling champion in high school. We didn't use weights. We used the ground, and we got to work. So I went to my room, and I got to work. I was pre-diabetic. I was 275 pounds, and I began to lose the weight. I went to the nurse's station. I asked for the nutritionist. I said to the nutritionist, listen, I'm really not eating well, and I know it's affecting my mental health. Is there a better food regimen you can put me on? She looked at me and looked at my food log, and she said, well, Kevin, you should probably stop ordering 4 meals per one healthy meal a day. You're eating 4 unhealthy meals every single day, 3 times a day. You probably should stop doing that. I said, that makes sense. I started eating healthier foods, and I started to feel better. I went to my nurse's station, and I said, listen, I'm an insomniac. I'm not sleeping. What can you do for my sleeping habits? I said, well, we can give you this medication. I said, no, you've got me on all this medication. How about we do something more natural? And one of the nurses came to me and was so kind to hand me a $2.99 CD player from Walgreens. Remember CDs from Walgreens? So she had in that player 3 CDs: Whale, Ocean, Rainforest, Music, and Noises, proven to augment sleep function and help with your circadian rhythm. They helped with brain patterns and brain function to affect sleep function. It was amazing. So I started listening to them 20 minutes before I go to bed on a sleeping timer every night. Within 2 weeks, I was sleeping again. None of my family or friends would house me anymore. They wouldn't take me home. So I had to wait in that hospital for a halfway home for the mentally ill. People were just tired of my struggle, and it was already my 3rd psych ward stay. And no one could handle it anymore. And I don't blame them. I was a handful. From that point on, I would end up going into a halfway home for the mentally ill, the first of 2. I would try my best to get on the routine treatment and program, and I was doing a pretty good job until a freak accident left me getting kicked out of that halfway home. Luckily, I got to go to another halfway home and get stable there. This was just a part of the journey to get better. I would keep working hard for my mental, mind, brain, behavioral health, and well-being. I would learn the tools and tricks to balance my brain health. And I would start a routine of educating myself as to my diagnosis, reading every Google alert I could on bipolar disorder, helping to understand every treatment and reputable form of therapy that was going to work for my disease. And I started putting those plans into action. I'm educating myself. I'm eating healthier. I'm exercising every day. I'm helping myself by doing positive coping strategies and mechanisms for my brain health and function. I'm using music therapy and art therapy and even talk therapy, 3 forms of therapy, and I started using a blue wave light box technology shortly thereafter to help my brain health. All of these things are put together in a regimen and routine every single day that I follow to a T. And I started to get really, really better. I'm doing really, really well. I would go back and forth on my mental health. I would fall off my treatment therapy program. I would go back into psych wards many times, but I would still follow the baseline to stay on an even keel. It's been a difficult road, but one I am not regretful of. I'm grateful that I got the ability to stand up for myself, to realize my self-worth, and to be productive in society. I'm grateful that I get to exist any moment of any day. And I'm really grateful to be here in front of you. Today, I take nothing for granted. Nothing. Not any place I get to go because I almost couldn't. Not anything I get to do because it almost didn't happen. Importantly, not meeting virtually any of you who are watching right now because we almost never got to have this exchange. I'm so very honored to be a part of the HomeAid Summit today. I'm so very grateful to be a part of this platform. Every waking moment is a beautiful day. Every time you get up is a gorgeous day. Every morning I wake up, I say a prayer and thanks to God to exist, and I do the same before I go to bed at night. We don't all have to have a faith in God or a higher power, but certainly have faith in yourself and in the human condition. Have faith that you have the ability to turn your life around no matter the pain you're in. And if you can find gratitude inside the pain, I promise you, you can always defeat it. I have built this life brick by brick from the ground up, and I'm very happy today. Hopeful, happy, resilient, and you can be too. I live with my lovely wife, Margaret, and we've been together for 16 years, married for 13. She is my greatest gift, the best thing that has ever happened to me, and my most beautiful blessing. She's helped save my life on countless occasions, and she'll always be there for me. And I really appreciate it. I've certainly made our relationship difficult with my diagnosis over time. We've had some pretty rough times during certain experiences. But we stuck together, and we always will. We'll fight the good fight. We'll keep on keeping on, and we'll always be here tomorrow and every day after that. If you're going through mental pain, I want to give you a couple of resources here that will help you find that light at the end of the tunnel. You can go to youtube.com/Kevin Hines, and you can go to the playlist, The Art of Wellness. 10 steps, 12 videos, how to better balance your brain health. 3 to 5 minutes each, easily digestible, easily shared. People as far as Peru, Africa, China, and Japan, and America have said that these steps, when you work on them for 6 to 9 months, dramatically change your mental health. You really want to just master one step at a time for a month. And on the next month, master the next step. Do this for 6 to 9 months and change your life. You don't have to have bipolar disorder like I do. You don't have to have a mental illness. You can be just going through a hard time. Heck, you don't even have to have a hard time to use these steps to better your brain health. You could just be a person who wants to follow a routine and regimen and change your life. They're beneficial either way. You can go to kevinhinesstory.com/resources and find 3 amazing free resources for you right now. The first being The Art of Wellness in a PowerPoint format that you can teach anywhere, anytime. The second being the playlist, The Art of Wellness, and a guide to the YouTube channel to find out what videos help what disease, what videos help what kind of recovery, even substance use recovery. You can go there onto the resources page at kevinhinesstory.com, and you can find a parents and teachers guide to suicide prevention for teens, one of the most heavily downloaded in the field. Take it, use it, it's yours, it's free. Guys, I'm so thankful to be a part of this conference, so grateful to exist every day, and I want to say, finally, that I appreciate each and every one of you. I'll end with a quote that means the world to me, and it's helped me on many occasions. It's helped me stay alive during suicidal ideation, and I want to share it with you now. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That is why we call it the present. And you don't have to take my word for it. Master Oogway from Kung Fu Panda said that, and talking turtles always know what's up. Once again, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, and today is a gift. That is why we call it the present. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for hearing my words. I hope they help. And let us all cherish today, tomorrow, and every waking moment we get the privilege to call this a beautiful life. Thank you very much.
Kevin, thank you so much. I think that the well over 100, maybe close to 200 people who are watching this webinar are now sort of part of another broader army of people who I think are now even more prepared for some of the issues that you've had to, address and other issues that they might in their work or in their life. And so I just want to thank you for your time, for all that you're continuing to do throughout the country. It is my role to ask you to facilitate some questions, and so I have a couple for you. I just wanted to start off with one here. What someone had texted me, and they asked, what are the signs to watch for, recognizing that sometimes medications may be making things worse?
Sure. I think that some of the signs to watch for when you think medications are making things worse are removal from family functions. I think seclusion, isolation is a big sign. I think that any changes in their general sleeping and eating habits are signs that they're struggling mentally. Changes in their hygiene or hygiene efforts are definitely issues there to consider. These are also signs that someone is potentially going through suicidal ideation, so something to consider there as well. But if the medications are making it worse, you're going to see them falling apart mentally, and that's going to be abundantly clear. Yeah. Oh, you're muted, Dean.
How about if I unmute myself? There we go. It usually helps. But what do you say after asking the questions? Do you have suicidal thoughts? Do you have a plan? What if they say yes?
So if they say yes, it really isn't about what you say. It's about what you do. Physically being there in the moment, helping to keep them calm, suggesting some resonance breathing in through the nose, 4 seconds, out the mouth, 8 seconds, helping them understand that you've heard stories of people that have attempted and survived, like this one, and that life can and will get better with time and energy and hard work, and that you're willing to help them get through their struggle or their pain emotionally. I would say sometimes just being a shoulder to lean on is more important than anything else, and letting them know that when they think of suicide, their thoughts don't have to become their actions.
Great. Another, I think, very good question. Someone just wrote in, during those times when you can feel yourself spiraling, you can't shake it, what do you do?
When I feel myself spiraling and I can't shake it, I go to my wife and tell her what's going on. Where I used to hide everything I was going through, today I tell the truth to whoever's in front of me. I've been at airports spiraling without my wife, and I've told TSA agents that I'm unwell mentally. And, that's how you almost land yourself on the no-fly list, but they helped me. They got me to safety. So it's really about trying to be self-aware prior to a mental breakdown, so that when you have one, you can be self-aware enough to ask for help from whoever you need to ask for help from.
Okay. And how can people get help who cannot afford to go to a psychiatrist or psychologist, or cannot afford the hospital bill from the psych ward?
Absolutely, and this is really crucial because there's so many people that can't get the help they need because of finances and financial issues. My suggestion is to really search out and find reputable forms of treatment that are done by the individual, by the person, by you who's going through the diagnosis, or even not. Maybe it's not a diagnosis. Maybe you're just going through the pain. You can go to my playlist on YouTube. That playlist is for all of us. That playlist, if you work those steps, you will change your life. That's been proven. They're science-based, evidence-informed tools to balance your brain health. There are things you can do without being able to have medication or doctors or psychiatrists or psychologists that can better balance your mental well-being. You have the ability and the power to augment that section of your life, and there are plenty of resources out there to help you do that. Mine is just one of them. But certainly all those resources I gave you at kevinhinesstory.com/resources and the youtube.com/Kevin Hines channel, please utilize them, because, you know, they really help people understand that they're not alone, and that, you know, for all of those of us who can't afford regular treatment, these are things that we can do singularly to change our lives.
Great. Another question that just came in. My brother has depression. He sees therapists and he's on meds. We aren't very close, and I don't honestly know how bad his depression is. But for whatever reason, whenever I hear about a high-profile suicide in the news, I immediately think of him. Reaching out really just as easy as calling him up and saying, "Have you ever had thoughts of suicide?"
Absolutely. It's a terrifying question when you've not asked it before. I'll be honest with you. I'll be blunt with you. It's a hard question to ask someone you love. But what you want to do is, you know, get yourself on a Zoom call like we're on right now, since we're in COVID times, and just so you can see his reaction, and say, "Hey, you know, I was thinking about you, and I keep seeing these things in the news about people passing away by suicide. It really worries me. I know you go through depression a lot. Have you ever had these thoughts? Have these thoughts ever been pervasive in your mind? And I want you to know that if they have been, I'm here for you. I'm here for you to bounce these things off of get them off your chest. You're not alone in these thoughts." You know, having that blunt, honest, and true question is really the way to go, because you could find out that he's been either having them for a while and it keeps him up at night, or you could find out that no, he doesn't have them. He just has depression and needs to get through it. But he's so grateful. He'll be so grateful that you decided to be a part of that narrative, a part of that question, a part of that process. You know, and he could say, "No, you know, I never have." And you say, "Well, you know, if you ever do have those thoughts, I want you to know the first person you should call is me."
Okay, thank you for that answer. For those that are experiencing during the pandemic where things are different with our health system, how can people not feel ashamed to ask for help? There are so many COVID restrictions with hospitals. Most people can afford health insurance during this time. Do you have some suggestions?
So you don't have to be ashamed to ask for help, and you want to be free to ask for help from multiple sources. If you can't afford hospital stays and things like that, you can still ask people in your circle to be checkpoints for you. People you check on and people that check on you to make sure you're safe that day. You can start to build a peer support network of individuals who are your personal protectors, if you will. So they call you and they check on you daily to make sure you're okay. And be bold. Don't be afraid to ask for that kind of help and that benefit, because if you don't have the ability to go to these hospital stays or get the insurance you need, you've got to have some kind of safety net if you're going through it. And so asking your friends, your loved ones, your confidants, and your acquaintances to be a part of your peer support network is totally okay, and in the realm of possibility. And I think that you shouldn't be ashamed of that. You should be honest about it, real about it, and I'm going to be real with you. You might find that there are some people that just can't handle that responsibility, and that's okay. That's their issue, and that's their comfort level. You don't take offense to that. Just keep working through your list of friends and family until you find someone willing to be like, "Okay, I got your back." And when you need that pat on the back, when you need that help and that support, you can call me anytime. You'll find those people. There's plenty of those people out there.
Okay. We've got two more questions for you, Kevin, okay? And people who have additional questions that have not submitted, if you go ahead and just do that anonymously, we'll be responding anonymously when we send out the survey tomorrow. So, but the one question we have is, what do you suggest doing when we recognize someone having a mental break but refuses help?
So I have been that person that's having a mental break and refuse help. And I think that you let's be frank, you can't force somebody into treatment. It's impossible if they're over 18. What you can do is never stop encouraging them with wellness tips and tricks and reputable forms of treatment and therapy, reputable forms of help, just like my playlist. You can share those things with them kindly on a regular occasion. You can search out, you can get a Google alert on mental health help, and every article you get, you can send to them. There's so many things you can do to help them see the light that they're in pain, that they need this help. And I believe eventually you'll break through to most people. Don't feel hesitant to share with them some of these resources and say, look, whether you're ready to admit it or not, I personally know you're going through it and I want to be there for you. Here are some great resources.
Right.
And share away.
Okay. And fine, we have one final question here. And again, others who have questions, please go ahead and submit them and we will respond anonymously tomorrow. But there are certainly cultural issues as relates to accessing mental health issues. And this last question sort of addresses that. What is your suggestion for helping those that are culturally ingrained to believe mental health issues don't exist, or seeking help from mental health professionals is not something that you should do?
Well, as a person of mixed race myself, being part Black, Portuguese, Jamaican, and African, I can tell you that, and part Latino, I can tell you that there's a lot of people in my communities of color that are taught that mental illness is not real, that you can pray it away, that it's all in your head. And to those of us who have lived with families that take that stance, I think you have to go outside of your family network to search for the help you need. Because if you're inside your family network or your friends network and they don't believe that these things are legitimate, then you really have to either educate them to the point of them understanding that they are sufficiently real and totally legitimate and you need the real help you need, or you need to go to people who look like you, who are in the field of brain health and well-being, who are, therapists for example, there are groups of therapists that just see African-American young men, and they themselves are young African-American men. And their sole purpose is to help people who are iffy about their symptoms and who don't believe in mental illness or who say pray it away, recognize that these are very real problems that need to be dealt with. And so there are resources out there to help people like you who are maybe culturally different from the norm in thinking about mental health and therapy and mental well-being, recognize that this is as real as the hands in front of my face, and that we need to get treatment for it. We need to get help, and that getting help is okay. And you need to express to them that getting help actually makes you stronger, not weaker, and doesn't make you less than or less valuable.
Okay. Kevin, thank you so very much for your remarks, for answering all of these questions. I know there's other resources that you've identified and encouraged people throughout your remarks that you should, that you're encouraging people to take advantage of after today. And I'm sure many people will do that. And we will certainly look for you in the future, both nationally and locally. And we hope that we have an opportunity at HomeAid here to work with you again. And we're going to go ahead and conclude your part of the program here. Thank you again for all that you're doing to support these efforts. I'm going to go ahead and note that there are some other questions here, and we're going to go ahead and answer those and get back to people. We're going to go ahead now and take a 5-minute break. It's 11:29, and we'll resume at 11:34. Encourage everyone to just stand up and stretch. And we have a great speaker, Gina White, who's going to be following Kevin, and I think you're going to be equally as pleased and excited to hear from her. Thank you again, Kevin.
Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.
Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started in just one moment. I'm going to go ahead and get ready for our next part of the program. Very, very, very exciting next part. And Gina Rollo-White is going to be speaking with us. And I'm just going to give everyone just one more minute, and we're going to go ahead and get started. And I will go ahead and introduce Gina. But beforehand, you'll see the poll that has popped up, and I hope that you take some time to answer those questions. Those will be really illuminating at a later point. Okay, because I'm an on-time person, we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me go ahead and introduce to you Gina Rollo-White, the Mindful Junkie. Gina is the founder and CEO of the Mindful Junkie Outreach, a not-for-profit organization, and she has, over the past 15 years, she has tremendous experience as a mind-body teacher, educator, and author. In addition, she is an MA in Mindfulness Studies with an emphasis on first responders, and her graduate thesis was Mindfulness in Law Enforcement. I thought that was really interesting. She has spent the last 6 years developing and delivering trauma-sensitive mindfulness trainings, programs, and workshops tailored for law enforcement, correctional, fire, EMS, and other trauma-sensitive communities. Gina has worked with leadership teams from dozens of police, sheriff, and fire departments. She's an active member of the Trauma Informed Community Network in Virginia. She's authored the DCIS approved criminal justice mindfulness training curriculum, which has been used as the backbone for all her first responder mindfulness training programs. Tactical brain training, interesting, mindfulness for first responders. It is now my honor to go ahead and introduce Gina White. Thank you.
Well, hello everyone. I am here and I'm starting my video. Oh, there we are. Hi. Welcome back after your break. I thank you so much for the introduction, Dean, and thank you, HomeAid, for having me. I feel like, I know like Zoom is really weird and all these conferences are now different than everything else. And I feel like we have to give Kevin a clap. I know that he can't hear all of you, but I feel like when he was done, I just wanted to clap for him. So I don't know if you don't feel weird about doing it, maybe just sit there for a second and thank you, Kevin. That was amazing. We so appreciate what Kevin said to all of us. I am going to share my screen with you so you can all see. So stand by. I know that's there. So welcome. There is a way to make the boxes smaller and bigger on the side of your screen. I don't know if you've had access to this before so that you can see there's a small box you can make me or a big box. So whatever works for you. I teach mindfulness. I teach mindfulness to first responders, as Dean said. And the reason why I got into mindfulness for first responders was because it turns out I have 2 first responders as parents. And when I was in graduate school writing my thesis for mindfulness, I used a bunch of different first responders as part of my thesis. And one lieutenant asked me, he said, you know, hey, why do you work with first responders? Like, what of this is interesting to you? And I had this aha moment of like, oh, right, my parents were first responders. Not sure why I didn't know that before, but my father was a firefighter and a paramedic, and my mother was a nurse, and she worked as a head nurse of a trauma unit. And I'm from California, which I think it's probably worth me saying also. This is not hair because of COVID and I haven't been able to get a haircut. This is what I normally look like. If you were having any questions about that, this is normally what I look like because I'm from California. I do live in Northern Virginia now, in Alexandria, Virginia, but I am from California. I just want to clarify that one little thing in the beginning. Here's the deal. When I was growing up, I experienced every single day my parents coming home and discussing with me all of the trauma that they had been through during their day. My father was on the streets with gang violence. Being in California, there were a lot of gangs. He dealt with deaths of children. He dealt with shootings. He dealt with rape victims. He dealt with homelessness. My mother, in the hospital, dealt with the same exact things. Almost daily, she had to go and tell family members that their family member had passed away. And when I was writing my thesis and trying to understand why I wanted to do mindfulness for first responders, it came to me one day that it's all of this built up trauma that people are dealing with on a daily basis not only affects them, but they're coming home. And what I saw when my door closed at the end of the night, when my parents were inside my home at the end of the day, what I saw was, these amazing badass people who were out there every day saving lives. I mean, my parents were both badass, but what I also saw was a lot of trauma. My mother was constantly depressed. You know, a lot of things that Kevin just said resonated so much with every experience I've had growing up. You know, depression, suicidal ideation, violence. My mom was depressed all the time, misdiagnosed on multiple occasions. And the outcome was her sitting behind her closed door in her bedroom crying, her being despondent, not being connected with us as a family. My father, he chose to deal with his trauma by extreme violence. We grew up in a really, really violent household where there were holes punched in every single wall, couches knocked over, doors ripped off hinges. And this is just the experience that I had growing up. And when we think about, the trauma, right? I was thinking about presenting today, and I was thinking about, it's not just the trauma that we're dealing with, but it's the secondary trauma that we're dealing with. Because a lot of you folks, your nonprofits, who you're working with, you're hearing stories on a day-to-day basis of traumatizing events. And these things they have an impact on us. And so I started thinking, what are the tools and mechanisms that people have to deal with primary trauma, to deal with secondary trauma? And Kevin was amazing. I wrote them down. He named like the things he does. He does nutrition, education, sleep, exercise. These are all really amazing things that we can incorporate to deal with the trauma that we experience, the suffering. He talked about suffering too. We're all suffering, right? We have to have tools to deal with the suffering. And what I fell into was this concept of mindfulness. After a ton of research, I'm a researcher at heart, a ton of research, a ton of education, going back to school, I came upon this concept called mindfulness. And I think sometimes when I looked at your poll, a majority of you had either heard of mindfulness, practiced mindfulness, done yoga. So there are many people on this call who have heard of it, but I still think I think it just said like 16% said no. So for those 16%, but also the others, I think there's a misconception on what mindfulness is. It's not clear what mindfulness is, right? It's a tool to help regulate stress, but what is it? And sometimes we think it's like a bunch of hippies smoking pot on a mountain, right? And yeah, maybe they're practicing mindfulness. I don't know. That's what this picture is supposed to be, is a bunch of hippies, by the way, at like Burning Man or something. Or maybe we think of like the Buddhist monk who has the orange robe and he's sitting on a mountain completely tranquil. And sometimes we even think of yoga. So there's all these misconceptions of what mindfulness is. The reality is, one of the big aspects of mindfulness is that it's a tool, and it's a tool to manage stress, right? Because no matter what, we are all suffering. We all have stress. I mean, before COVID-19, before all of the riots, before all of the systemic racism that we're seeing in law enforcement and with just across the board, right? We all had stress in our lives before this. And so then you add COVID, you add all working from home, working from, your closet, even though no one said they were working from their closet. I suspect there are a few people who might be. The reality is, all day long, we're kind of saying to ourselves, what the, right? All day long, I'm looking around and I'm like, seriously? Now I'm dealing with this? Now I'm dealing with that? What the? And so when you think about mindfulness, it's kind of to get away from these WTF moments and put some tools surrounding how to deal with the stress and the trauma and the chronic trauma, like my parents experienced, the chronic trauma that I experienced from secondary trauma. How do we have tools to help with this chronic trauma that we're experiencing? And here's where mindfulness comes in. And I think it's really helpful to have a frame, right? To have a definition of what mindfulness is. Mindfulness, so if you look at this, it's awareness that arises by paying attention on purpose in the present moment. And the idea is that, and this is something Kevin talked about also about our brain, right? This is all about training your brain to think. Training your mind to notice that you're thinking and then do something about that information, because it's not enough to just have the information. You have to then do something with the information, right? So you have to be able to identify that something is occurring and then do something with that. And all of this is framed. And again, my little picture on the corner can be moved around if you can't see the words on the side of the screen. But mindfulness, the mindfulness I teach is trauma-sensitive mindfulness. And the idea is that we are constantly trying to navigate this concept of a window of tolerance, right? We have this area in the middle where everything is copacetic. Things might be annoying and frustrating, but you're able to deal with it. You can work through it. You're able to think. You're able to process information. But when we are under chronic stress, highly stressed on a daily basis, a moment-to-moment basis, when we're overwhelmed, we pop into one or two different areas. And it could be hypoarousal, which is down at the bottom, or hyperarousal, which is up at the top. And sometimes when you're experiencing chronic stress, you live in these spaces. And everything that you're reacting to is based on this concept of being hyper-aroused or hypo-aroused. So you're feeling either overwhelmed or anxious or completely despondent, right? My dad lived up in this hyper zone. Everything was an emergency. No matter what we did, it was an emergency. Going out to eat was an emergency. Driving down the road was an emergency. And all of his actions were based on these emergent situations. Whereas my mom was down at the bottom, hypoarousal. She was standoffish. She didn't want to talk about things. Everything was fine, but really all you saw were the tears. And the idea is that when you start practicing mindfulness tools that I'm going to go over, we're going to do practices of mindfulness tools, you're able to modulate and stay within this window of tolerance. And even just knowing about this concept, oh, there's this thing called the window of tolerance, even knowing that is going to help. Going, oh, am I riding the rails? Am I hitting the edges and bouncing up or bouncing down? Knowing that is the first step. Second, right, what do you do? Okay, how do you get from a hyper-aroused state, from really stressed and anxious, which I know some of those questions came up when you were asking Kevin, what do you do when you're spinning, right? So what are you spinning, or sometimes we call it ruminating, when your thoughts are spinning out of control or you feel like you're having a panic attack? What do you do to help get you back into the window of tolerance? I'm going to go over some of those things. And I don't know, let's just do it right now. So we're going to practice a mindfulness exercise. It doesn't matter if you've never done it before. It doesn't matter if you think it's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. You're just going to practice. And this one is based on breathing. And the really cool thing about breathing is that you're already doing it. So it shouldn't be that hard. But one of the ideas behind trauma-sensitive mindfulness is that these are all just suggestions. I talked about misconceptions earlier. There's a misconception that when you do mindfulness or meditation, you're supposed to completely have a blank mind and think about nothing. Wrong. Huge misconception. In fact, almost the opposite is true. When you are practicing mindfulness meditation, the idea is to not disappear your thoughts. The idea is to say, oh, I have a thought. Now what do I do? It's to notice that your mind has wandered away from something that you're focusing on, like your breath, like we're going to do right now. And because it's wandered away, that's a little indicator to you that, oh, I'm not focused anymore on something I'm supposed to be focusing on. So in this case, breathing. I need to redirect and come back. So in mindfulness meditation, the idea is not to have a blank mind. It's to notice when you have a thought. Oh, right, I'm thinking. And then you do it in a way that's non-judgmental. You go, oh, I'm thinking. You don't go, oh, God, I'm such an asshole for thinking during meditation. No, you say, okay, I had a thought. So what? I'm going to come back to breathing. And the way this trains your brain in the real world is that when you're not meditating and you're walking around and you're dealing with life and something stresses you out, you're trying to work and you're focused on responding to an email, for instance, and then all of a sudden you start ruminating and your head starts spinning. You have trained your brain to notice when you're thinking or mind wandering, and you go, oh, I'm doing it. What do? You've trained with different tools, listening, breathing, sensing, and you go, oh, right, I need to take a breath. You take a breath and you refocus and come back. So let's start right now by practicing a meditation and knowing that at any time you can pivot. At any time you can move. At any time you can change what you're doing. This meditation is not about sitting in one perfect spot, having no thoughts, not moving at all. No, these are all suggestions and ideas. So to set this up, you're going to find a comfortable position. You know, Kevin also talked a lot about safety, and this is something that you guys are providing tons of safety. When you have a safe place to be, you feel secure. Part of meditation, and when you practice it, is sitting in a safe, comfortable position. So find something that's safe. I used to meditate, and if I had my back against a door, which is that way for me, it felt very unsafe. I don't like having my back against the door, probably by upbringing from my father, who was like, never have your back against the door, quick, hide under a table, someone's coming, right? So I don't like having my back against the door. I know that's safe. So find a position that's safe. And anytime I'm doing mindfulness meditation, I'm sitting with my feet on the ground and I'm sitting up tall. So I am not sitting on the ground. I'm not typically laying down. So a chair works great. Most of you are probably already sitting in chairs. So sitting in a chair, upright. So you want to sit in a tall position. You don't want to be uptight. You want to be upright. And let's just begin by taking a breath. So a really deep inhale and exhale. So inhale and exhale, exhale, exhale. All right, if you're comfortable allowing your eyes to close, the suggestion is to just close your eyes. You don't want to squeeze them really tight. You want to keep them just rested gently. But if that's not good for you, so what? Keep your eyes open. Find a spot to look at and just stare at that spot the whole time. So whether your eyes are open or closed, let's take another breath. So inhale and exhale, and you're just going to follow along with my words. And if at any time you want to move or open your eyes, just go ahead and do that. And the idea is that you're focused on your breath right now. And maybe you say to yourself the words inhale and exhale. Maybe you even become curious and identify where you're breathing right now. So do you notice movement in your belly? Do you notice movement in your chest? Where do you notice movement right now? And then if you already have a thought, like, how long is she doing this meditation for? Or am I breathing in the right spot? Then you go, oh, right, I'm thinking. And then you redirect and come back to inhaling and exhaling, noticing maybe your feet on the ground, maybe even bringing awareness, your thoughts, your sensations to your legs. Press down on the chair, feeling your weight. Inhale and exhale. One more time, breathing in, breathing out. And now transitioning to a sense again, maybe feeling your hands on your legs, just noticing the sensation of your hands against your pants, bringing your thoughts, your senses to your feet on the ground. And now transitioning to the room that you're in. So maybe that means opening your eyes. Maybe that means just looking around because your eyes were open. And if it's available to you, let's stretch. So bring your arms up over your head and take a final big, deep inhale. Maybe looking up at the ceiling. And then slowly, as your arms come down, you exhale. Now, if we were live, I would probably ask everyone right now to raise their hand if you had thoughts that were wandering, if your mind went into thinking, and almost everyone would raise their hand. So I'm just going to assume some of you have your hands raised. But the idea is that mindfulness is a tool. Breathing the way we just did is a tool to get you out of these zones of intolerable, out of overstimulated, understimulated, and come back into the present moment. What did Kevin say? That the present life is a gift? No, life is something, because life is a gift because the present, I don't know, you guys can remind me later what he said, but something about the present moment. And the present moment is right now. The reason why the present moment is so important with mindfulness is because it takes you, if you can focus on the present moment, it takes you out of the anxious thought. It takes you out of the depressive feeling. It takes you out of spinning out of control, like someone asked about, because you can't have two actions at the same time. If you're thinking about an actual feeling, like if you're touching the desk and thinking about the feeling of the desk on your hands, you can't have this thought over here spinning of how miserable life is. You're in this present moment. But the deal is that not every, like there are a bunch of different mindfulness tools, and not every tool resonates with each person, and not every tool works in each situation. So you have to be able to start training your brain to know that there are all these different tools available to you, and we're going to go over a couple more, because maybe this breathing exercise sucked for you. Maybe you hated it. Maybe it made your chest feel tight. That's so normal. Maybe it just made you feel more anxious focusing on your breath, right? So then guess what? A breathing exercise isn't one you lean into, but there are other ones that you can lean into. And the idea is that with mindfulness, we're trying to build this concept of resilience. I know you're looking at this and you're like, what does Bozo the Clown have to do with resilience? Okay, well, Bozo the Clown, this was a punching bag, and I can't see you, so I don't know how old all of you are, but some of us who are my age remember these punching bags when we were younger. And we would just beat the crap out of them, right? And they would hit the ground and they would come back and bounce, 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 bounce. And the harder you hit these bags, the longer they bounce back and forth, and the longer it takes for them to be balanced, right? Every time you knock this thing down with the harder force, the delta, right, between it spinning really fast is correlated with the strength of which you're hitting it. And mindfulness teaches us that no matter what, we're going to get knocked down, right? This is the whole being punched concept. This is the whole pain exists. Pain is going to exist in your life. You're going to get knocked down. But when you're able to start applying mindfulness tools, you decrease the delta between when you get knocked down and when you find balance again. When you're able to calm your nervous system down. When you're able to take a breath, to use listening in something in your environment, to be able to sense a feeling, to be able to imagine something that makes you happy. When you're able to recall those things at the moment that you're being knocked down, you decrease the delta of how long it takes you to recover. So mindfulness is part of the recovery process. And the idea is that it's not enough to just know that we're being knocked down, right? You have to identify these signs. What is occurring in your body, in your mind, that tells you you're being knocked down? How do you know you're spinning? How do you know you're in a bad mood? How do you know that you're pissed, right? How do we go from being pissed to knowing that we're upset, to knowing that we're sad? And that's another part of mindfulness, right? So it's being with and working with, identifying that there is something that exists within us that is an indicator. It's a warning sign telling you you are outside your window of tolerance. Something has occurred and you are outside your window of tolerance. But we have to listen to it. You have to start identifying these signals, and they're different for everybody, and they're different in every situation also. They can be a sensation. It could be, so would mean like, for instance, when I get really upset with my daughters, because I have 3 of them, when I get really upset, I can feel the heat rise in my chest and my neck. But I didn't know that before I started doing these identification mindfulness tools. It was just there. Now I feel heat rise in my neck, and it says, you're out of your window of tolerance. And I go, okay, now I need to apply a tool I know. Maybe it's taking a breath. So you can have a sensation, you can have just a mood change. All of a sudden you're in a bad mood. You can have spinning thoughts, right? And just repeating stories in your head, repeating circumstances that you've gone through. And it could be like a feeling. You could feel agitated. You also might have images in your mind of things that you see that are bothering you, right? Like almost like hallucinations, but for this case, they're more just images that maybe you envision someone who is yelling at you. And so the idea is that when you can start identifying a sensation, a mood, a thought, a feeling, an image, you know it's a warning sign that you're out of your window of tolerance. And then you go, okay, what is a tool I've practiced that can get me back into my window of tolerance? So we did a breathing exercise. And by the way, these are all really brief. When you're doing them on your own, they're going to be a little bit longer, but there is no magic number. If you did it for 5 minutes, if you did it for 3 minutes, they're still very effective. This one is a listening exercise. So we're going to do the same thing we did before. You're going to find a position that's comfortable for you, a position that creates safety. And you're just going to follow along, and I'm going to ask you to think about a couple things, listen to a couple things, and just follow along. If at any time it's not working, just transition to something else that works, or open your eyes. Maybe you have to stand up. You can stand up. So finding a position, let's just go ahead and take another breath. So inhale and exhale. And if it worked for you to have your eyes closed before, try closing them again. If you didn't before and you want to try this time, go ahead and let them rest gently. If your eyes are open, just keep them focused on one spot and just stare at that the whole time. And let's begin by just listening. So listen to the sounds in the room that you're in. I'm going to be quiet for about 15 seconds and just listen to the room you're in. Maybe you were able to hear the lawnmower that's going on in my backyard. Maybe you were able to hear an air conditioning or a computer. Whatever you noticed, just see what that made you feel like. So be a little curious and still listening to my words. We're going to continue with a little bit further exercise of identifying these different ways of noticing signals. So whether your eyes are open or closed, taking another breath, inhale and exhale. And now transitioning to some different things I'm going to ask you to do. So thinking about something lightly agitating. So lightly agitating, I want you to think about maybe someone that you recently had a little tiff with, or something that happened that was just a little annoying. I don't want to, we're not going to talk about anything traumatic, just something that's like lightly annoying, frustrating to you that occurred recently. And I want you to think about that situation right now. And as you think about that, I want you to be curious about how you think about that. Did you have a thought? Did you have an image? Did you notice a sensation in your body? Okay, now transitioning, inhale and exhale. And now I want you to think about something that brings you joy. So someone told me a story once about how they always imagined a bunny rabbit. And every time they think of a bunny rabbit, it brings them joy. Maybe you think of a pet that you love, or maybe it's nature, something in the environment, being outdoors. Maybe it's a special food that you enjoy, or maybe it's just taking a breath. And really being curious here on how you know that that makes you happy. What in your body is telling you that that's happiness? Is it a smile on your face? Is it a thought? Is it a sensation? Transitioning again, inhale and exhale. Transitioning to listening to the sounds in your room one more time. And now pivoting one last time to noticing a sensation. So feel your feet on the floor, maybe your hands on your pants. Taking one more breath, inhale. And as you exhale, opening your eyes or refocusing on the room. That was a listening meditation, and you were listening to a couple different things. Listening to sounds in the room, which is one way of doing a meditation, or listening to internal signals that are alerting you to what's going on, right? Maybe I know that when Kevin was talking, I have histories of homelessness in my family. I have history of suicidal ideation in family members. And I was being triggered. I was being triggered a lot. And I knew that because all of a sudden I was clenching my fists. So when I was listening to him talk, all of a sudden I was like, my hands are clenched. Why is that? And I went, oh, wow, I'm being triggered. And I had to actively presence myself. I had to actively feel my feet on the ground. In the middle of his presentation, I was like, notice your feet on the ground, notice your seat in the chair, because I was starting to kind of go off with this secondary trauma, right? Listening to his stories, that can be secondary trauma. And it's helpful to know, right, I was out of my zone of tolerance. I need to come back. I need to take a breath. And the idea is we're learning that there's always stimulus in our environment. There are always things that are occurring. And our tendency is to react to them. And we react based on habit. We react based on the way we were reared. And when we start practicing mindfulness tools, we go, okay, there's a stimulus that's occurring in our environment. And in between how we would normally react to it, we can create space. And that space can be the form of noticing something, of listening to something, of breathing, of maybe even get up and moving. So you put something in between the stimulus, whether it's listening to someone's story or actually having thoughts yourself, and you go, okay, I'm experiencing X. I need to put space in between that so that I have agency on how I want to relate to the stimulus. I want to be responsive rather than reactive. And responsive is active engagement in your prefrontal cortex. This is where information goes to your prefrontal cortex and you can think. The picture you see here is driving, right? I mean, road rage was a huge part of my life growing up in California on the 405. Road rage, I just thought we naturally did road rage. And I can't tell you how many people I myself have tried to drive off the road prior to mindfulness, how many people I've yelled and screamed at, I've pulled up next to and thought, I'm going to give them a piece of my mind, right? That's reacting. What we're trying to do is create space in between the incident, which is someone cutting you off because someone's always going to cut you off, and reacting to it. Someone cuts you off. Instead, you go, oh, right, maybe I just feel the presence of the steering wheel and take a breath. Maybe I listen to some really great music. Maybe I turn up my radio. Maybe I just quietly flip them off so they don't see and I don't yell at them. Maybe that's the answer. But the idea is that when you start choosing tools that you know can help you, that you've now identified as something that resonates with you, you choose a tool and you can apply it in these moments. In these moments when you're outside your window of tolerance and you want to get back in. I mean, I only have you for such a short amount of time. I am cramming this down your throat. I get that, but I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway. So we're going to do another meditation. If it's too much for you, you are more than welcome. Get up, walk away, close your computer, go to the restroom. These are all just suggestions and options that I'm trying to provide so that you know there are different tools out there. And if listening didn't work or imagining didn't work or breathing doesn't work, there are other things you can do like this. This is a traditional body scan. So I'm going to take 2 minutes and I'm going to do a body scan with you. It's going to be quick. We're going to get in, get out. So you're going to find that position again, that position that was comfortable for you. And it's great to always just start with a breath unless that doesn't work for you. So just inhale and exhale. And if your eyes are closed, just make sure you're not squeezing them. And let's begin by letting your feet kind of feel the floor. So just think about your feet on the floor. And bring your thoughts, your awareness to your legs in their entirety. So feel your entire leg from hip to knee to foot. Inhale. And on the exhale, see if you can just relax your legs, softening your seat into the chair. Maybe you feel a little heavier. And now bringing your awareness, your thoughts to your belly, feeling your stomach, your chest, just noticing what those feel like. Inhale. And on this exhale, noticing how your chest can soften, your belly softens, relaxes. And moving up to your shoulders, your neck, and being curious. Do they feel tense? Do they feel stiff? Inhale and exhale. And as you exhale, maybe noticing the sounds in the environment. Letting your neck relax, your chest relax. Moving up to your jaw. Noticing if your teeth are clenched or your eyes scrunched, just bringing awareness to your face and softening your mouth, your eyes, your eyebrows. Nice big inhale, inhale, inhale. And as you exhale, relaxing your eyes, your cheeks, your jaw, your shoulders, your belly, your hips, your knees, all the way down to your toes. One more time, breathing in. And on this exhale, softening, relaxing again your eyes, your mouth, your chest, your belly, your hips, your knees, your feet. Transitioning back to the room, opening your eyes, looking around. And just recalling how that felt for you. How does a body scan feel for you? Is that something good? Was that frustrating? A lot of people use this to help them sleep at night. When you're lying down, it's a great meditation to do. And all of these things are just ways of bringing you into your window of tolerance, whether it's a breathing meditation, a listening, a body scan, a naming, even walking, doing a mindful walking. There are all these different types of things that you can find on YouTube, on the internet, on apps. And the idea is to find something that you resonate with, something that works for you, finding also a voice that works for you. Not every voice is the same. You know, maybe my voice is totally annoying to you. I'm not the person to do meditations with you then, but there are other voices that you'd be able to resonate with. And think about these things, you know, which meditation worked? Did you like the listening? Did you like the breathing? The idea is that you're trying to notice that we live in this state of stress, right? We live with a lot of stress in our environment. We live with a lot of chronic stress for ourselves, secondary trauma with others. And if we can't figure out ways to help ourselves be calm, right? It's that whole thing, put your own oxygen mask on first. If we can't figure out ways to decrease our nerves, right? To bring ourselves back into the window of tolerance, we're not going to be effective for all the people that we're working with. Nonprofit work is challenging. I'm a nonprofit, I know. You're wearing multiple hats. One of the hats is being with all these people, right? And if we're burnt out, for instance, we can't be there for other people. If we don't have resilience, we can't be there for other people. If we are experiencing these things on a daily basis, like my parents were coming home every single night with violence and depression and sadness, these things, they exist. And we have to find ways to provide tools, to create mechanisms so that we can calm our nervous systems down, so that we are effective for ourselves, so that we create happiness for ourselves, so that we can be there for others, right? I mean, it's what you guys are all doing. All you're doing is giving yourselves all day long to other people. And if you keep giving and giving and giving without giving to yourself, you're not going to be able to be there for others anymore. The idea is that you find some way of resourcing, right? Whether it's through a meditation like this isn't a magic pill. It's one option you have. Nutrition, exercise, like Kevin said, there are tons of resources available, tons of ways that you can bring yourself some care and some resilience. And the idea is that you just have to find something that resonates with you, something that works for you. If we're going to open this up for questions. If anybody has a question, Dean's going to be working with that. Thanks, Dean, for doing this. I'm going to let you take it from here.
Great. Well, Gina, what a great presentation. I want to just start by saying you're full about WTF. I think you underestimated the 20. I think it's way higher. Bozo the Clown. Oh my gosh, I've not seen that since my childhood. But the body scan, I just feel a lot more relaxed, and thank you for giving us that time to sort of focus on ourselves. So we do have some questions. Let me start by saying, you mentioned that the practices we tried were brief. In my own, they would be longer. What does that mean? Is 5 minutes okay? When I think of meditation, mindfulness, I think sitting for a long time, and it feels inaccessible.
Yes, and that is, I mean, so spot on. And thank you for asking this question. Right, there is not a specific time for meditation. And one of the things we've learned over time is that sometimes sitting for long periods of time can actually be traumatic. And there are studies now that are showing that if you've ever experienced any trauma in your life, sometimes sitting for long periods of time can actually bring up the traumatic feelings. And so the idea is, don't judge yourself for how much time you're sitting meditating. If you sit for 3 minutes, it's going to be effective. If you just take 3 breaths, like 1, 2, 3, right? It's going to be effective. So you don't have to have there's no prescribed time. It's what works for you. For me, I sit 20 minutes. When I do a meditation, I sit for 20 minutes. I have an issue with time. I never think there's enough time. So sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I don't have 20 minutes. I'll sit for 10. I'll sit for 5. Sometimes I'll just take 3 breaths. So whatever you do, you're trying to find little minutes throughout the day to throw something at it. And so maybe it's before you go out and get in your car, you take 3 breaths. That's effective. Maybe it's right before you know you're going to have a meeting. You sit for 5 minutes and just listen to the ambient sounds in your environment. So you're going to find that you build on it too. And maybe you try sitting for longer. And if that works, great. Maybe you don't. It's what is going to work for you.
Great. We had a question come in, and this sort of leads, something you just said sort of speaks to some of this. Is there such a thing as being good or bad at mindfulness? And how can I get better at practicing?
Yeah, okay, I suck at mindfulness. Let's just say that to begin with. And I am doing it all the time. I'm kidding. I think that, and why do I say that? I say that because my kids tell me all the time, you're not being mindful. I'm like, please. So there's no bad and good way at being mindful. I think that this goes when I put that definition up earlier about non-judgmental as part of the definition of mindfulness. We have a negativity bias, right? We naturally lean into negativity. We naturally lean into self-deprecation. It was a mechanism that we used when we were evolving, and there were a lot of fight-flight issues with, the fire and the caveman, and we evolved to notice negative things because that helps save our lives. So it's natural, it's normal, we all do it. But with mindfulness, what you're training yourself to do in the moment of doing a meditation it's that thing that I talked about at the beginning of noticing your thoughts. And instead of saying, oh, shit, I'm thinking again, right? That's judgment. Instead, you go, oh, I'm having a thought. What do? I come back, I take a breath, and I start over. And one of the huge constructs of mindfulness is beginning again. And I feel like that's what we all just need to remember to do, is to begin again, because we can constantly begin again. And so it's rather than judging yourself for not doing it right, or I just did it wrong, or I yelled and screamed at my kid this morning, I am such a horrible person. I go, right, I did that. Maybe it wasn't the best answer to things. I'm going to start again, and I'm going to begin again. And that's what you're training to do by coming back each moment to starting over. Your mind wanders, you come back non-judgmentally.
Great. I just have one more question. Gina, I'd love to spend more time here today, but speaking of time,
I know.
I need to sort of just ask one more. I like to run or ride my bike or listen to music, which helps with stress and to get me out of my head. Is this considered mindfulness, or does it need to be sitting?
So, yeah, that's mindfulness. I mean, anytime you're focusing on yourself and you're doing something to take your mind off of your stress, bam, that's totally mindfulness. But I would add to that and say there is something about training your brain that is very specific with these mindfulness exercises. And in the exercise that you're doing, the cycling, that's taking your mind away from your stress, which is really amazing. And yes, keep doing that and don't stop. That's amazing. But there's another component that you can add, which is training your mind to think. And you're training your mind to think about your thoughts. And that's done very specifically. That's done in these meditations when you're noticing a sensation in your body and then doing something about it. A lot of this about being in your window of tolerance is about, and I mentioned this, it's not just working with, so finding a tool to help you get out of it, but it's being with. You have to train your mind to identify when you're out of your window of tolerance so that you can then apply a tool to be in your window of tolerance. And that is done with a more traditional sitting meditation or standing or walking. But when you're actively bringing your mind back to something on purpose, so strategically coming back to the focal point, whatever the focal point is. But you can, by the way, do this while you're writing. So you can actively do these exercises while you're writing. However, I don't recommend closing your eyes because you might fall or run.
That's good advice. Well, let me go ahead and just conclude things today. Gina, I think that you've done a fabulous job. I mean, certainly the environment that we all are dealing with on each and every day, the tools that you've given us here are invaluable. And so thank you for spending the time with us. We really, really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Kristen, and we look forward to seeing you again soon, Gina.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you, Gina. Something I probably should have said at the beginning, but I did not, is that I realized that some of the information presented today may have been triggering for some of you. And I do hope that, although that can be a negative feeling, that we do use some of those feelings just in general that came up today as fuel to find compassion and kindness for yourself and others, especially those we work with, those around us and the clients that we're working with, our families and our personal lives. And some of the takeaways, just knowing that it's okay not to be okay, asking for help for self or those around you, and using holistic tools, whether it's some that you learned today, whichever ones may or may not have resonated, or finding other things that really sort of stick, whether that's yoga or, Gina talked about meditation and mindfulness. I mean, these are all just tools to put in your toolbox to really help you heal. We all have a story. We all have a story. And it's important to start with ourselves so we can, as Gina said, be there for everyone else and find that inner peace. So I appreciate you guys for hanging in there with us and for absorbing all of the information today. And just thank you to Kevin and sharing his story and for being here with us on this planet, to share that story with all of us, to remind us that we are not alone and that, again, we're here and ask for help. It's okay not to be okay on a regular basis, but that we can find ways to cope and get through that. And Gina, I love you and I appreciate you. And you have just such a badass way of sharing this information, and I adore you for being here and sharing it with everyone in this environment. Dean, thank you for your part in helping us facilitate questions and for keeping the flow of everything. I appreciate you too. And to all of you who logged on, I know we are all tired and sick and zoomed out, but I appreciate you for being here and taking the time, because this is important information and it couldn't wait until 2021. I needed you guys to hear it. Those of us running nonprofits, those of us working in nonprofits, those of us working with clients day in and day out, you guys are doing the hard stuff. And Gina mentioned the secondary trauma. It is very real and you have to take care of yourselves. And so I am thankful. I am so grateful. My entire team, Silda and Madeline, who have been working tirelessly to make sure that everything runs smooth today. We're grateful that you were here, and know that it was recorded. We will be sharing that link, as well as a survey. We love feedback with these housing forums. As you know, usually it's in paper and we can chase you out with it. But this time it'll be sent tomorrow. And so we ask for feedback, not only on this presentation, but if you have ideas or topics that you would love for us to hear about next year. Obviously, we are hoping that we will be back in May of next year with an all new forum, and hope that all of you will be there. Please feel free to share that recording. There are resources up on the screen right now. Some of the ones that Kevin and Gina both have, there's handouts from Gina that have some of those meditation tools, realizing that it was hard to write those down and put them into words, but those are attached. We have some HomeAid resources that I mentioned, just so you, a reminder of what we do and what we're here for. And, we'll be attaching these as well tomorrow. So thank you. That's all for today. And I hope you guys have an amazing rest of the week and weekend ahead. Thanks again for being here.